guys, Eric and Kim here. We're going to do our non-spoiler review of No Time to Die, the long-awaited, even longer awaited than anyone could have expected, new James Bond film that, of course, is the final one for Daniel Craig. Let me do like a quick sort of plot summary here just to kind of kick us off. Which is that James Bond and Madeline Swan, which almost rhyme, by the way, his names, are living a happy life together. But guess what? That doesn't last long, or there wouldn't be a movie. Spectre comes back into play. Bond begins to suspect that Madeline may be keeping some dark secrets from him. At the same time, there's a whole other new threat, which is Rami Malek's character, who I'm going to try to pronounce Lucifer. Kim, how do we think it is?
I think it's Lucifer Safin.
That's it to me, damn it. I'm just going to say Safin. He's got this, there's this diabolical new bioweapon in play that he's after, but he's not the only one after. And so Bond ends up kind of coming back into action. He's working with the CIA. He's working with MI6, who have replaced him with a new 007 to try and stop all this at the same time as he has to sort of deal with this woman that he loved, but now he doesn't trust. So that all being said, there's plenty of other twists and turns in this movie. We'll keep to ourselves for now. But Kim, what were your overall thoughts on No Time to Die?
Well, yeah, just to put it into context, I suppose, you know, I was in London last night at the screening the premiere was held at the Royal Albert Hall, but there were simultaneous screenings in Leicester Square, and I believe you also saw a screening at the same time where you are in Los Angeles. But it felt like a big occasion, and not just because of the spectacle that they'd laid on last night, but we waited a long time for this film, and you know, I think in terms of scale, spectacle, and also tugging at the heartstrings, this film steps up. And I wouldn't say it was Daniel Craig's best Bond film, but it's good. You know, and I'm celebrating it. It should be celebrated. It marks our return to, you know, start to return to normality. It was delayed so long, but I'm also here to critique it. Essentially, I enjoyed it, and it was fast-paced despite its long running time.
Yeah, that's something really impressive about it. So yeah, this movie I think it's 2 hours 43 minutes. It is a long movie. It doesn't feel long. It doesn't. I had just rewatched all the Daniel Craig movies, and if you want to watch a movie that feels long, watch Spectre again. You know, where you can count every minute. This moves that has a good pace. Kim, I'm assuming, did you get the same intro from Daniel Craig at the beginning?
Yes, intro, yeah.
Welcoming us back. You know, again, keeping in mind that No Time to Die was the first big movie to get delayed weeks before it was supposed to open in spring of 2020. I really like this movie. I agree it's not his best one. I think that is still Casino Royale. But I think it's a really solid Bond movie and a really nice way to wrap up this era of Bond. Having just rewatched them all, I think kind of helped too, especially coming off of Spectre. But yeah, I was very impressed by how it moved. I really liked the direction, which we can talk a little bit more about, and thought that, you know, overall, it delivered what people want. And like you said, it has this sort of extra thing happening where it's like we're finally getting this movie that people have been waiting for a long time. But luckily, I think it does deliver what you want from a Bond movie. You know, there are quibbles. We'll get to some of those complaints that, you know, we both have. We'll see if they're the same ones or not. But yeah, what did you think of it as a sequel to Spectre? That's such an interesting thing, because the Craig movies, of course, have been more serialized than any of the Bond films had ever been. And this is coming off of a very poorly received one, and yet is very tied into it with Madeline and with Blofeld. It has to deal with a lot of stuff that a movie people didn't really like set up. So what did you think about how they handled that?
Well, I mean, I say from the outset that I'm a fan of Spectre. Yeah, and I guess I'm in the minority. Yeah, I mean, it works for me as a sequel. The only thing I didn't do going into it was rewatch Spectre in time ahead of screening it. So you know, it opened and you know, so I can forget things quite quickly in this job. You know, it's you know, one thing comes in and another goes out, and I would have appreciated a bit more reminder of what had happened before, I think, within the film somehow. But other than that, yeah, it works really well as a sequel to that film for me, and as a final chapter in his whole tenure, Daniel Craig's whole tenure.
Yeah, I will say it worked for me as a sequel to Spectre 2, having not liked Spectre. I agree with you because I had the benefit of watching Spectre the night before, but Spectre now came out 6 years ago, and it still would have been 5 if the movie opened as originally scheduled. There is some stuff where if you don't remember that movie very well, like who's Madeline's dad and how did he play into things? Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I know who Mr. White is because I just rewatched all those movies. So you might be a little lost. I think it mostly works. And what I really was impressed by was one thing I didn't like about Spectre. I didn't dislike it as much as like just feel, well, that didn't really work. Was at the end of the movie, Bond goes off with a woman that they're really trying to sell us as like, you know, one of the loves of his life. But I didn't really feel that. So this movie, that relationship is so key to this movie that I was a little nervous about that. But I actually think this movie sold me much more on their relationship. I'm not saying it's one of my favorite movie love stories ever, but I believed in it. I believed that, you know, that they cared for each other, why it would hurt him so bad to suspect that now maybe she's betrayed him, and all the fallout from that. So I really, both of us coming from different perspectives on Spectre, think this works as a sequel to Spectre, so that's good. Let's talk a little bit more about Cary Fukunaga as the director, who most people would know for True Detective season 1. I thought he did a hell of a job here as a Bond director. Some of the Bond movies have been hurt, I think, by sort of strange choices for directors and directors that don't have a flair for action. But I thought he definitely knew what he was doing on that level. What did you think of his direction?
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, I'm not sure that there were particularly standout action. I mean, all Bond sequences are generally amazing anyway,
Right.
but in terms of, you know, if I compare it to Casino Royale, which I did recently rewatch, that opening sequence across the roof, well, in the sky, you know, basically with the free running, there's nothing really in this that compares to that for me. But having said that, all the action sequences were really well shot, really clear. And there's actually towards the end that sequence in the stairwell, the fight sequence is brilliant. So on a smaller scale than the Casino Royale opener, but very impactful.
He does nothing to the same level, but he has a little bit of a one shot action scene like he did on True Detective to cool effect. And yeah, I thought his stuff, like, it really kind of pops. I agree with you. Like, there's nothing that I was like amazing, but all really fun, really moves well. You can always follow the action, which I know is always funny to say, but is important, and some directors don't do. And some of my favorite stuff was probably early on. We should mention that this movie has one of the longest pre-credit scenes, if not the longest, probably the longest in Bond history. And it's like multifaceted and involves many different set pieces. And I thought it all kind of built really well towards, you're kind of waiting for those titles and to see what are going to be the abstract titles this time. But I really liked it.
Like watching an episode of Riverdale. They do that all the time with these really long opening sequences.
It's funny because the last Mission Impossible Fallout, I remember, had like was it like 26? It had a really long sequence before their titles too. So maybe that's just the new thing, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's really, you kind of forget that you haven't had the opening titles, and then they come in with this big bang. So
yeah, it worked really well. So let's talk about issues a little more. What stands out to you as something, you know, you wish were different or would have tweaked a little?
Well, I mean, you know, there's this divisive thing about the film and what they've done with Daniel Craig's Bond throughout, I suppose, but it's more so in this because it all comes to a head, and that's kind of a focus on the emotional and his psychology and emotional state and love. And while that gives him as a character a lot of depth, you know, I think a lot of people feel that it takes away from this traditional idea of what James Bond is. Ruthless womanizer, I guess. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Bond definitely needed updating. But what it does do is kind of lay bare this quite thin villain in Safin, who, you know, Rami Malek is great and he's really chilling, but there isn't a lot of diving into what makes him tick and his backstory. And I'd like more than that. I felt like maybe they're teasing him, they're introducing him as a villain, an overarching villain to come back in the future if the next phase of Bond wants to include him. But I would have liked more of that here.
Yeah, he's my big complaint too. And yeah, it's not on Rami Malek. It feels like they wanted this character to have a huge impact and be this sort of huge person pulling strings. But yeah, it like you said, kind of thin. Like there's not a lot there to this villain, and I just kept feeling like they wanted there to be like he was supposed to be this sort of big impactful villain. But yeah, also it is funny that he feels like he's about 10 years too young to play the character. I won't get into why, but there's just like a little weirdness with the age of the actor they chose versus sort of what they want his entire life to have been. That was an odd choice to me, that I kept thinking there was going to be a plot point to explain it, but they didn't. So yeah, I agree with you. That was to me kind of the most notable thing is
I was going to say, and they teased that, ahead of time, that he was supposed to be the cruelest, most sadistic and coldest villain of perhaps the whole Bond franchise. But, even in Craig's films, he pales in comparison to Le Chiffre to me.
Yeah.
And we don't really see the extent of his cruelty and sadism.
Yeah, I agree. While Christoph Waltz is in a smaller role in this film as Blofeld, since he's not like the primary villain, I actually thought he did a lot of great stuff with the time he had on screen. After again not loving Spectre as much, but he's always great, and he was and I think kind of you just feel like they just needed something else to this character, something else that would really make him pop that unfortunately isn't there. Anything else that sort of jumps up to you as sort of like a highlight or something that you really appreciated about the movie?
Well, I loved you mentioned Blofeld, and I loved him in this movie, and that scene in particular between I'm not going to spoil anything here, but between him and Bond was kind of like Bond of old, but updated in a good way. And it reminded me of, I know that we have seen clips of this. He reminded me of like a Hannibal Lecter meets Dr. Strangelove type character. And the chemistry between them in that sequence was cool. That was one of my favorite bits. And one action sequence that's come to mind that I didn't mention before that I loved was the boat sequence.
That was really cool too. Yeah. And I loved you've seen a lot of this in the trailers, but the stuff with the car, the tricks the car does in this movie, and so there's some stuff on sort of some small bridges I really liked. And then I have to mention as another highlight though is Ana de Armas, who's in this movie, has a character named Paloma, and not a huge role either, but it goes to show you don't need a lot of screen time to make an impact. And I guess it's a pro and a con. I tweeted something similar, that it's like I think a lot of people will come out of this movie wishing she had more screen time, but I also think it's like that really shows you just come in and like make this great impact. It's such a fun performance. It's a kind of nice twist on the young new recruit and kind of where they go with it. I think that might have been one of the sequences I most felt Phoebe Waller-Bridge, having done some of the rewrites on this movie, was like that character and kind of the little sense of humor that comes in a different way there. Really, really dug her. And I think, clearly she's a star on the rise anyway, and it's fun to see her reunited with Daniel Craig after Knives Out in such a different way. But I think that because this is a Bond movie, this will put even more attention on her, even this small role. People are just gonna be like, put her in more stuff,
Yeah, it's funny. By the end of the film, you kind of almost forget that she was in it,
right?
Because it's quite fleeting and not that significant, I suppose, in the great scheme of things. But she, I felt strongly that they kind of had to get her out, because in the old Bond, would have bedded her, right? But
Right.
this Bond, she's problematic if she sticks around.
Right. No, it's true. It's true. Yeah, any final thoughts here? I mean, to me, I guess the main thing is I did feel, even though these Daniel Craig Bond movies have been sort of, a bit rocky, and they've been kind of that every other one thing, and people feeling like the strong, even though I know you like Spectre, but with Casino Royale is most people's favorites, and I think Skyfall is most people's second favorite. But I do think that this was like a nice wrap up on this kind of, it's a funny thing because of course we know, James Bond will return, he'll return forever. But I was really happy Daniel Craig even got to do like a proper final movie, because rewatching a lot of the Bond movies lately, it's like no one got to like do a final movie. Like even Pierce Brosnan, so recent in history, very liked has Bond, even if his movies were all over the place. Like he just did a movie, it wasn't the good one, and that was his last one. So I felt like this was cool that they got to like tell their own story, which was pretty damn serialized, especially for Bond, and kind of ended on a satisfying manner.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that was cool. And the things that they've done in this entire run have opened the door for, maybe maybe not a Bond, a Bond universe, an extended universe, which would be great, which I'd love to see. Ever since I first saw Octopussy and 009 killed in that, I wanted to know more of his story. So
it is shocking at this point that they haven't, like, I know there was talk once of Jinx, of the Halle Berry character, getting a spinoff, which would have been funny since no one liked the movie she was in. But in this day and age, yeah, I agree with you. It does feel like, I don't know if these iterations of this character will be back at all, but it seems like we'll get there. And I agree. This movie really showed you that, like, yeah, there is a lot you could do with this entire world if you so chose. So, those are our overall thoughts on No Time to Die, guys. I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars. What about you, Kim?
I did really enjoy it, but I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 stars.
Got it. So those are our thoughts. I hope you guys dig it. Obviously, we'll be getting lots of reactions to this movie in the next couple weeks. Thanks for watching, and keep it here at Fandom.